Welcome to our podcast, Leading Past Limits. We share lessons learned from the hard-won experience of mission-driven leaders so that you expand your horizons as a leader that places service before self. I'm Kumar Kibble, a leadership coach and the principal at GuideQuest. I've been passionate about developing leaders since graduating from West Point more than 30 years ago, and have led high-performing teams as a military officer, special agent, diplomat, government, and corporate executive. Now I partner with leaders and teams as a coach to help unlock their potential and maximize their impact. In this first season, join me in learning from entrepreneurs, CEOs, Army generals, police chiefs, war heroes, thought leaders, and more. Be sure to subscribe and don't miss out on lessons learned from the real world School of Hard Knocks. Our guest today, Kyle White, has extensive expertise in many areas of the veteran experience, including transition, employment, treatment of post-traumatic stress, as well as erasing the stigma associated with mental health in American society. Kyle is also known for being a Medal of Honor recipient. As a recipient, he focuses on promoting employment, education, and mental health care of service members and veterans. In addition, Kyle enjoys working with organizations to promote good citizenship. He served in the U.S. Army as an airborne infantryman with the 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team. Following his heroic service, he earned a degree in finance and worked in the finance sector for 6 years before co-founding 1109, a company that helps U.S. businesses, government agencies, and philanthropies develop innovative and transformative programs impacting veterans, service members, and their families. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
So we generally kick off with the fundamental purpose. So what do you view as your life's purpose? In other words, when the end comes, what will you want the people you care about the most to say about you?
That's a good one. For me, over the years, I think the answer to that question has changed. Just as our lives change and the things that we find important and value evolve as we do. At the end of the day, or at the end of life, I just hope whatever I accomplished during my time on Earth, that it somehow left the world in a better place than when I entered it. And so the work in the mental health care space, and the suicide prevention efforts, if we can even touch just one life, potentially saving one life and altering that person's chance of success and long-term happiness. And I think that's a measure of success in my book.
Yeah, well, thank you. Your responses kind of lead into, I suspect, the next question, which is, you are actually the first co-founders and entrepreneurs we've had on the show. Well, no, I think you've got a lot to say about, what moved you to start 1109. And I'm particularly interested in this idea of risk, because you have served in the military, have dealt with risk management in that context. But I think it's a whole different kind of courage and risk management when you're trying to start something from scratch, not knowing, whether that's going to work. So I'm curious as to what moved you to start 1109.
For me, I think I share a common mindset, and I think it's across the board with those that have served our country. That feeling of fulfillment when the job's done, the mission's complete, your deployment's over, and it's just really you have a purposeful mission. When I got out and went to school and started my career in finance, you might have, the chance to make a small difference, especially in my role as a fixed income trader. I might make somebody a couple extra $100 a day or whatever it may be, but the measurable impact beyond that is lacking. And so, especially after being involved in the veteran services space and mental health care space, just really the story of the American veteran, you realize that, there's a lot of areas that can be improved. And at the end of the day, sitting down with Lewis, we understood that, hey, we can do this better. There's a better way to go about, affecting change in a real, meaningful and positive manner. And so we started 1109. And partly because, that culture that we love so much about our time in uniform, something that was lacking in our current positions. And we said, I think we can make a difference. We can create an excellent company culture and really grow something special, the two of us. And 1109 has evolved a lot since, forming back in mid 2007 or 2017, excuse me. But, that driving force behind our reason for starting remains. And so, it's funny, you mentioned risk in kind of in pursuing that endeavor and taking that chance and starting your own business. And I really think it came full circle in that full realization of how risky, an undertaking like this is. When I left, my job at Bank of America in late 2019, and started off strong in 2020, and here comes COVID. That really throws a wrench into your plans. You have to adapt, overcome, and keep pushing forward. And we're coming out in the tail end of that as a company and as a country. And so being able to persevere through some of those challenging times, you really realize what the stakes are, and just use that. You can either take it as a way to stifle progress and get locked within the challenges you're faced, or you can say, hey, we're going to push through this. We're going to find a way forward and just keep charging.
What 1109? What's behind the name?
Yeah, so it's interesting when thinking about starting a company. I think probably every founder goes through this. It's interesting how complicated it is to choose a name. I mean, there's so many different people using acronyms and whatever it may be, but it was important for us to have some sort of personal connection that really guided not only our mission forward, but encompasses what is important to us. As I was thinking about really the story of my life since November 9th, 2007, which is the date of action, which I was awarded the Medal of Honor, everything that has resulted in my life is because of that day. I mean, that altered my trajectory inside the Army, pushed me to get out and get my degree and enter into the finance world. And, without that, I wouldn't have met my wife, wouldn't have my kids, everything. And so, I always wanted to have some way of remembering that fact that, out of tragedy, can, oftentimes wonderful things can happen. And I also felt, very early on after that ambush that I'd be given a second chance at life, because I had more than my share of close calls that day. But I always wanted to remember, whatever I was able to achieve, whatever hardships I may face in the future, that I just always remember, things could be worse. And, also, when things are going great, not to remember those that, are not here anymore, in the second chance I have been given. And so, I forget how the specific name came up, but, 1109, November 9th is, the numeric, calendar day for that incident. And for some reason, it just stuck, took hold, it stuck. And, as we were thinking about, the logo and everything that encompasses it, it just really resonated with me. And I was like, that's what we're going with. That's the name of the company. And, if you look in our logo, and those that are listening, if you look up our website, you see the shape, our logo's in the shape of a guidon. So, always moving forward. And then the 6 stars that are within the E are representative of the 6 guys that were killed in action on 9 November 2007. So, very personal connection of, where it came from, and then also sort of an anchoring point on where we're going. So, within our company, mission and values, it's always to be veteran focused. It's always to, have veterans on the workforce. And if I could hire 100% veterans, I will. But the point being is that, whatever we're able to achieve as a company and as a culture together, we always want to make sure we're giving back to those that, worn the uniform, those that are serving back in our communities, their Gold Star family members and their children. And so, it's been an incredible journey, but, I always think that something about our story that really resonates with people we socialize it with. And it's important because it's really a glimpse of who we are, what we stand for, and what we believe in.
Now, you mentioned how that one day did so much to kind of shape your life moving forward. And I remember as a kid at West Point just being enthralled by the actions of Medal of Honor recipients and really the love that they demonstrated in fighting for their buddies to their left and to their right. But I've got to imagine, I mean, I can't imagine what that's like. I mean, do you ever worry about being defined or being looked at in a narrower way because of that day, because of November the 9th?
Yeah, absolutely. And Kumar, that's a great question. And I kind of indicated earlier, as we grow personally and professionally in our lives, our views can change. And this is really one piece of my life that I guess my understanding and my comfort level with being a recipient has changed over time. So, I'll give you a little story here. They always, in former recipients and people I've met, I shouldn't say former recipients, but fellow recipients and people I've met prior to the award ceremony back in 2014, it always told me, what the medal meant and how heavy it wears and things of that nature. And it really wasn't until the ceremony that day where I'm looking right at, the Gold Star family members in attendance and President Obama's, putting the award around my neck, that I really understood what that meant. And for me, it also really anchored the level of responsibility that comes with being a custodian of the Medal of Honor. Everybody always refers to us as recipients or awardees, whatever you may see fit. But, we're just really custodians guarding, a specific moment in our proud military heritage. And so for me, being given this tremendous platform, I might be able to walk into a crowd of 100 people and nobody recognizes me. But the minute I put on that medal, everybody's focus shifts, and they're incredibly attentive to what you have to say, and you better make sure that you say the right things. And so, for me, as years passed, I really wanted to ensure that whatever I chose to stand for as a recipient, whatever I represented, really reflected how I felt and really what mattered to me. And it was issues around really the story of the American veteran. So, the issues that are faced in education, transition, mental health and post-traumatic stress, and specifically, suicide prevention. Those are all real things. And for me, as time grew on, time went on, my comfort level in speaking about those and being involved and lending my support for those that are championing for those same efforts, really evolved along with that. And so it's been interesting, but as much as you would like to shy away from, hey, I'm just, Kyle White, I'm not Kyle White Medal of Honor recipient, that label is always going to be with me. And so being able to be comfortable with that title while still accomplishing your mission, it still remains a challenge sometimes, but it's one that I work towards, because always understanding that, like our logo says, and like I explained earlier, just being anchored in those values that you stand for and really living true to, the personal mission, that company mission, what you set out to do. It really helps keep things in balance and keep moving forward in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, for those that aren't familiar with what you dealt with on November the 9th, 2007, would you share a little bit about how that event unfolded and the difficulties you faced and the decisions you had to make?
Absolutely. And so, first off, while I'd love to go into complete detail on the story of the battle, we'd be here all day talking with that level of detail. But what I'd like to, direct the listeners to is that if you go on U.S. Army's homepage and search Medal of Honor, there's a great thing called the Battlescape. And so whatever I don't cover here, or whatever you'd like to learn more in depth about, you can, search my name, and there's a Battlescape. It gives different points of view from those that were on the ambush, unique interviews and diagrams to really help you paint the picture of what exactly took place on that hillside. But Kumar, I think it's important, to understand, and a lot of people may not know this, but I was 20 years old on 9 November 2007, and I had just been recently promoted to specialist. I was the radio telephone operator, so all in all, I was a pretty junior enlisted member of the 173rd. Still learning things every day, and still had a lot to learn. But really, the premise to the patrol we were on, and really our current status within that valley, in the Wygall Valley, was that we had been previously attacked at an outpost called Ranch House, located above a village called Aranis. And it was a well-coordinated attack. They had help from the locals. And so leadership, after the attack, decided to close down that specific outpost, and we relocated down the valley about 4 miles straight line to another outpost called Bella, which in Italian is beautiful, but I tell you what, that place was not beautiful. And strategically, it was probably in the worst location it could be. But that's a story for another time. And so we had no real connection with that village, since closing down that outpost in late August of 2007. And so when you think about our mission there and what we were supposed to do, especially as an infantry unit in very remote part of Afghanistan, it's really trying to build the goodwill. I think at the time it was referred to as the hearts and minds. And so you're really working with the local population to build trust, build coalition, understand ways that we can both defeat the enemy and build a good partnership in the process. And so as November approached, we were invited to a Shura meeting. And for listeners that aren't familiar with that, it's about the equivalent of your local city council meeting. And so we've been a part of a fair amount of Shura meetings up to that point. And for the most part, it's a handful of individuals, and mostly the elder members of the village. And, they tell us what they need from us. And, we ask where the enemy is every time. And, the same thing, no Taliban, but, that's a part for the course. But this time was a little bit different. And we'd known, based on the stories throughout our area of responsibility at the time, that anytime you're invited somewhere, specific time, specific day, there's a good chance you're going to get ambushed. And so, our leadership understood the risks, but decided, it's a good opportunity to re-engage with the population. And so we ended up, using the cover of night as our advantage to move on November 8th, 2007, to the village and pretty much stay the night in the school that we had built for the children of the village and engage in the Shura meeting the next day. So made the movement, got there, had the meeting the next day. And it's important to note this, because I mentioned earlier, it's normally a few elders in attendance, but this day specifically, after multiple delays in the meeting time, there's basically every male fighting age and above was in attendance, very engaged, repetitive questions. So for us, that was a little bit of a flag, understanding that, hey, this is not typical. We need to get back. Something's off. And we all kind of had that feeling in our stomachs that, there's something was happening or was about to happen. And I think a lot of us learn, trust your gut. And so we started heading back about 3:00 in the afternoon, and 30 minutes later, I remember it specifically to this day. I remember the tree I was looking at and the sound it made. It was just, one shot, two shots, and then, the whole valley erupted. RPGs, RPKs, PKMs, everything pointed directly at us. They caught us in a perfect spot on a cliffside out in the open. It was November in Afghanistan on a clear day. So sun was setting on us. It was, shaded out on the hillside that they ambushed us from. And they had us in a perfect spot. And there's something, a little bit different about my citation than a lot of others in the past. So if you read the incredible stories from Vietnam, Korea, World War II, World War I, all the way back to the creation of the Medal of Honor, oftentimes it's a singular act. You'll read about somebody heroically jumping on a grenade to shield their buddies, or, charging a pillbox, and, incredible stories that I feel like aren't even comparable to mine. But really what, Army leadership saw worthy of being awarded the Medal of Honor was really a collection of actions in where somebody at my rank, again, newly pinned specialist, which I firmly believe is the best job in the Army, art radio telephone operator, basically how the series of events unfolded. We were instantly hit. I was wounded. Almost everybody in the patrol was wounded. But at our specific location, we were cut off from the rest of the patrol. And since I told you we were on a cliff face, most of the patrol had jumped off the cliff down into the river valley just to be able to get some sort of cover and concealment from the incoming fire. But where I was, I had a Marine sergeant that was attached to us who was gravely wounded. I had my forward observer who was responsible for directing, air support, mortar fire, things of that nature. He was wounded, and I myself was wounded, but, obviously I got pretty lucky that day. But I understood immediately that we were stuck there. And so, what they credited me doing was saving the forward observer's life because he had been shot twice, and I applied a tourniquet on his arm to stem the bleeding. And then I fashioned a tourniquet out of my belt to stop the bleeding on his leg, and then exposed myself to fire a few times to try to save the Marine sergeant that was with us, but he would succumb to his wounds on the battlefield that day. After, I'd say, the majority of fire let up, just enough to get positive control of a functioning radio, I was able to call in and help direct air support, mortars and artillery, to help break the enemy's will. And then at the end of the day, I said, I guess the end of the incident in the middle of the night was helping coordinate medical evacuation for those that were wounded and killed in action. So it's a little bit of all of that combined with the level of, my level in the military itself. They saw worthy of the Medal of Honor. And so, I'll wrap up with this interesting fact that it's supposed to take like a maximum of 2 years. And so, it was really interesting learning after attending some of the funerals from the guys that were killed in action and returning just before Christmas in 2007 back to Afghanistan, and hearing from my commanding officer that, they're talking about the Medal of Honor. You're like, whatever. At that point in time, nobody had been awarded the Medal of Honor, who was still alive since Vietnam. And so I always made it a point, and I told myself very early on, if it happens, it happens, great. But if not, I'm going to keep living my life. And as the years, went on, I went to school and stuff like that. I was like, if it happens, that's fine. But it got to my senior year, final semester, I was like, what? I don't care. Just please let me get through college. Like, I just want to be done. And, it was about 6 months later that it all happened. So long story there, but it's one that I have changing perceptions on all the time. Probably will for the rest of my life. Worst day I've experienced, and, it was the worst day for a lot of families of the guys that were killed in action. But, out of that specific incident, it really gave me a purpose of what I need to do, not only as a recipient, but just as a fellow veteran and, citizen in this country. And so, yeah.
So, I'm sure there are a lot of listeners out there that they just don't get, how someone moves towards the sound of the guns. It's hard to appreciate, knowing that gunfire is coming, or, enemy fire, and you put yourself out there, you risk your life to save your buddy. What do you isolate? I mean, what is it about either the 173rd, your particular unit, the Army, that builds and forges those kinds of bonds?
Absolutely. And that's a great question, Kumar. In the years that have passed since not only that deployment, but that day specifically, I've had a chance to stay in contact with a lot of people I served with. And we always have said it was a special group of people that came together for that specific deployment. Some force, whatever it may be, it put those specific people in those roles to ensure the success we had, was possible. I've also learned to understand that it was the leaders that made all the difference. And so I've been to a couple other units, met a lot of people that have served at different times in different units all across the Army, Navy, Marines, whatever it may be. And, the thing that always makes a difference is leaders. For us, it was, I was coming into a unit that had extensive combat experience. They jumped into Baghdad right at the beginning of, OIF, and, had a lot of, storied units and people within them. The training that they put us through, they really ensured, and they would always tell us this, that we're just doing this because we want you to be prepared. You have to know this because it's your job. And what I always found was interesting is, it wasn't enough for us just to know, hey, I'm, an M203 gunner, I'm a SAW gunner, I'm an RTO. Like, that's my job. They want you to know everybody's job. They want you to know your leader's job, just because they all collectively knew that when bad stuff happens, the rule book's out. You have to be able to continue fighting, like continue bringing the fight to the enemy and getting everybody out there, because, at the end of the day, it doesn't become, hey, you're in a firefight with, an enemy on a hillside, but it's, hey, I got these guys to the left and right that I care about. Like, they're my family. Like, I need to do everything I can to get them back. Because I know they do the same thing for me. And so, that dedication and just that overall understanding of how they needed to prepare us to do our job, because, having never been in combat, I don't know what I'm supposed to expect, but my leaders took it upon themselves to, make sure I knew everything that I didn't know I need to know, and that we were, proficient as we can be and best prepared as we can be. It's through mentorship, it's through guidance, it's through training, it's through, really the whole experience that we went through. And I think that really any effective leader can do for their team is just share that experience, that knowledge, and just help us all grow as a team. And that's really what we did. Yeah. I still am in contact with my platoon sergeant from that time, who's now command sergeant major and just took over a new division, I think down in Texas or something like that. But, he wears a lot of, what happened to his platoon and the company during that time, because, he lost, 6 guys on that patrol. It was his call to go there, and regardless, the response is his choice as well. And, I told him years later that, the only reason I did what I did is because of you. I mean, you made it specific, you made it very clear to us all that we had a specific job that we need to be proficient in, but then we also needed to be prepared for every possible scenario that there could be. And it's through your dedication, your commitment to ensuring that, we're all effective in our roles and being the best we can be each and every day. That's the only reason why we succeeded as much as we did.
And I imagine he modeled what he expected from you. I mean, all good leaders do. I'm curious how much he challenged you, because I can recall instances where, the troops, we like to complain, especially when we're, if we're at the end of a long road march and now you got to dig in.
Yep.
And sometimes there's a temptation to kind of think, oh, the leader that's not making us dig in, he cares about us and everything. But actually, the one who really cares about you is the one that's building in the discipline and making you push yourself. So I'm curious. Tell us more about your platoon sergeant.
Yeah. So there's always one story I like to highlight, and for me, it was before we deployed. Going through our training ups, and something that's special about the 173rd and specifically the 2nd 503rd back in 2007 is we were on a base so small in Italy. Like, you basically did your physical training off post. There's no training facilities, no room for anything. And even if everybody's running at the same time, it's too crowded. And so when we do our training cycles, be 30, 45 days, and we load up on buses and go to Germany for that whole time. And it was during one of our exercises in this place called Hammelburg, and I was I think a PV2, so as new as I can be. And I was pulling guard in this barn, and they were returning from a patrol at like 2 a.m. And I was in Overwatch, basically above the barn door, and they knocked on the door to be let in. And he yells up at me, he's like, "Hey, who's up there?" I was like, "White sergeant." And he's like, "Why isn't anybody down here?" I was like, "Well, I assume somebody would be down there." And he's like, "Well, assume's a stupid word in the Army." I was like, "Oh," so after I got done doing, a whole bunch of push-ups and getting on a cold night, it's just like that level, for some reason that moment has always stuck with me. And it was just like, wow, I have so much to learn. And like, this is the person who's going to teach me. And, the leaders that were above me, because, we have obviously team leaders, squad leaders, they were all chosen for a specific reason. It's because they align with that thought mentality that he had. And really, when you meet somebody like that who's effective, it's almost contagious. Like, you just see somebody who you want to be like, because I remember, thinking about how we all viewed him, how we respected him. We were all scared of him, but, at the end of the day, we knew that, when I'm an E7 and I'm a platoon sergeant, like in his shoes, like I want to be like him, because, just understanding how we all felt because of his leadership, like I knew he was effective. I knew exactly, like, he only cared about us and wanted, the best outcomes for us and make sure we were best prepared. And so, in a little, physical description for him, I think he's about 5'6", just this bald, mean guy, never smiled. He would never have to yell, but he could just talk, and you just knew, okay, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. So he's obviously hugely influential for you in the Army and beyond, because you're taking lessons learned from that.
Yeah.
Who else has been influential for this next phase of life when you become a civilian?
And so, I've learned that, probably I don't have a single individual that's influenced me more than, Sergeant Stalker did during my time in the Army. What I've learned is, like, I take little bits of, conversations and relationships, and, those are things that stick out, like, this person's really good at this, or, I really like the way they do business here. And just sort of picking up little lessons from people along the way. Almost like, collecting attributes, if you will. Yeah. If I meet somebody and they impress me for one reason or another, I really like to think about, why is it? And, is it something that I can do, or is it, just something they're naturally good at? But, I think, having an understanding of the world around you and the different points of view that, everybody has and the lives they've lived up until this point, we can all learn from each other. And I think being able to recognize, and what I've learned is being able to recognize, little bits of people that, make them who they are. Why are they so effective? Why are they so successful? Or, why am I crying because of their story? All those little things, you can just pick up and really understand that, for me, I don't have one person I look up to, but, dozens, because I think there's, excellent things we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. There has been that model in the past where you kind of have a single mentor, maybe it's a formal relationship, but actually life, and professional life gets so complex, and there's so many different nuances, as you pointed out. It's great to have a team, a team that you can go to for just-in-time advice, or to pick up, lessons learned from. Which kind of is, probably is a good segue into 1109 does diversity and inclusion work, human capital management, a whole range of different innovative solutions that are provided to various organizations. Talk to me a little bit about the advantage, the advantages of a diverse team, and leveraging different backgrounds, skills. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I'd like to probably relate that a little bit back to, serving in the Army as well. Why does the big Army, tend to rotate people every 2-3 years? It's to get that diversity of thought and experience into, different teams for that collective learning, to ensure we avoid things like groupthink and, what do they say? Complacency kills and stuff like that. And so, for me, as we start this company and we're involved in all these different areas, because, you touch on a couple, like, diversity inclusion falls in the human capital space, and we do IT services, cybersecurity, pretty much everything. But, what we understood is that, there's, if I come in and I'm going to talk about diversity and inclusion, I can offer my point of view, but I'm not going to have, I'm not a be all subject matter expert in that. But what I do know is there's a ton of people out there that have unique points of view. Like everybody's lives up until this point that we meet and have this conversation have all taken different paths. So collectively, like being able to harness that in, either help educate a larger population or help just share those experiences and make them relatable with other populations, I think it's extremely important. And so for us, it's funny, we'll talk to, potential partner companies or other customers, and they'll be like, well, it kind of seems like you do a little bit of everything. Well, if I find the right people that can bring, the right perspective, the right education, the right experience to help solve or add value to a customer or partner, why wouldn't I explore that? Because at the end of the day, are you moving the bar in the right direction? Like, are you adding significant value? Are you able to help, change the environment that somebody's working in, help make it more inclusive, help make it, just better for everyone to be their full selves each and every day? And so, for us, it's all about just bringing the right team together to help solve some of these problems. And it's really been a rewarding experience because at the end of the day, just like conversations like this, Kumar, we learn a little bit about each other, and then you just kind of collect those little stories, those little tidbits, and, you can come together, with excellent minds that you meet all the time, and, really come up with some, creative programs, creative trainings, things of that nature. And really at the end of the day, when it all comes together and it clicks and, you're able to deliver something great and either, help somebody, like I said earlier, be their full selves, or, have a push to go get that mental health care appointment that they've been putting off, or, finally admit that, hey, I do have some PTSD problems, or raise their hand and say, I'm feeling suicidal, things like that. If we're able to help achieve even one of those outcomes, that's a measure of success for us.
In our programs, we talk about leading change. We talk about some essential principles that are part of that include vision, resilience, strategic thinking, external awareness of factors that will impact the issue, flexibility. Would you comment on a major change initiative you've been part of, and that could be even standing up the business, but would you give us an example of what the essentials were that came into play for you in terms of successfully leading change?
Yeah, so there's been a few examples of that, both I think personally and professionally, either my time in the finance sector or at 1109 or even during the Army. But there's always been this saying, and it was my battalion commander back in 2007 who, we were having some trouble. I think the pace of the deployment was weighing on some people, had some substance abuse issues and things of that nature. But, he's talking to junior level leaders, and he's like, if you don't like what's happening around you, like, you need to be the change that you want to see. And I know that quote is not his originally. It's a famous one I've seen, probably hundreds of times since then. But, I think that's really an important part of leading change. Is just, if you, want to, bring a new program in, or, change the way things are done operationally, whatever it may be, don't be afraid to spearhead that effort. That on top of, you mentioned a lot of great things, strategic thinking and things of that nature. Communication is probably the biggest one. Because with, everything that can happen just with an organizational change. So think about, and I know this for myself just personally, like, I get complacent sometimes. I get very comfortable when I'm doing my job, like I know how to do it, my own SME, like things are great. But, anytime some sort of external force comes in and tries to change either the way I have to conduct business or, the way I want to conduct business, that's a specific challenge. It's learning, new methods, new processes, new policies, whatever it may be. But having that communication from leadership, just that, either effective instruction, mentorship, whatever it may be, I just think that's really, really important to just help guide that process. And then as a leader, being open to communication as well, just because you're sitting in that senior level position, I think the people I've always had the most respect for, and the leaders that I've probably bonded with the most, and literally follow what they say, are the ones that took the time to listen. Hey, you may be junior to this program or junior to this position, but what are the challenges you're facing with this process? Is there something that can be done better that we're not thinking about? It's just little things that you can do along the way. And I think that's reflective of, just my mentality as a business owner as well. Regardless if I'm talking with the CEO of a partner company or, my most junior level employee, I want to make sure that, communication's open, free exchange of information and ideas. Like, we can only do better if we learn from each other. And so that would be my answer. Long-winded, like most of mine.
You're communicating.
Exactly.
So then, I mean, I've got to imagine. I mean, I'm experiencing it myself as a new, trying to get a new small business concern off and running. The ups and downs, right? I mean, you think that maybe you've closed the deal, or different things get in the way. So certainly there's and here I'm getting at resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any strategies that you use to kind of keep battle focused, to keep persevering, and just to stay healthy, your overall well-being? What do you do?
Yeah, so for me, just overall well-being is really important. Just, if not only for the physical benefits of physical exercise, but for my mental state as well. Very early on, especially when I went through my post-traumatic stress treatments back when I was in the Army, for a couple of years, the one thing that really stuck with me is just physical exercise. It just kept me clear, kept me focused, kept me driving forward. And so that's something I maintained, all the way through till today. And I think it's a significant, driver of just how I attack, each and every day.
Yeah.
And as far as, the resiliency wise, I'd say my position in finance didn't have too many setbacks. It was, one that was more routine, a set of specific processes you went through each and every day, and that's your day. I'd say my real test since my time in uniform has been as a small business owner, and really understanding when those losses come. Even it doesn't matter how certain you are that you're going to win, you will lose. And when you do, how do you push forward through that? And so for me, I can sit there and focus all day on, oh man, X amount of revenue is gone, or, this is the X deal we've lost. But instead, I'm just like, oh, well, what could we have done better? And so I think personally, I could have done X and Y, and well, what did we do good? And then just building off of that, not really taking them as losses, but just as opportunities to learn and improve. I really think it's all about mindset, how you view, the challenges that you're faced with, the struggles that you're maybe dealing with personally or professionally. How are you framing it in your mind? Is it something you're going to push past? And how are you going to do it? And for me, that's how.
It's funny when you talk about kind of reviewing what you could do better and everything else. I go right back to like when I was a lieutenant in the Army, and I tell people all the time, everything I learned about leadership, I think 90% of it came from there, right? I mean, just whether it's troop leading procedures and giving people more time to prepare, giving them a warning order, developing courses of action, after action reviews, what went well, what could you do better? It just strikes me that I think that for those of us that have served, we take a lot of these things as like common sense, and because they've just kind of been naturally baked in as we've gone through that experience. And yet you get out there in the civilian world, and at least me, I'm surprised sometimes at basic leadership, skills that aren't being practiced. I don't know what your experience has been.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost a shame. And I wish there was some way that, the bag of skills can be transferred. And, I refer to the bag of skills as kind of the things all service members possess once they leave the service. I mean, it's just simple stuff. It's, effective communication, it's showing up somewhere on time, things of that nature in our work ethic and our discipline. But, you touched on some very, important points. And I think it's a lot of, what I share, viewpoints as well, is a lot of my how I view effective leadership and who I think are effective leaders is really influenced by my time in the military. And, it's often, we hear about it in some of our discussions with companies and customers alike, where it's, how do I get that experience from, these military leaders and then teach it to my mid-level managers? Well, you can't. I mean, it's, if somebody came up with an effective app to do that, we don't, but
money.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, but, I see a lot of times, I feel like, especially in the private sector, and again, this is just from my personal experience, a lot of times people are promoted based on, their merits as either, the educational institute they went to, or, how they performed in their specific role. But along the way, I think it's pretty common to not have any sort of leadership development progression within that same stretch. And so I think that's where it comes in, because then you have somebody who's, just used to doing their day job and worrying about what they're doing. And now they're responsible suddenly for, a team of 10, 15, 30, whatever it may be. Without an effective toolkit, or really that bag of skills to be able to, really lead that charge in an effective manner, you're left with what we see and what's often experienced in the private sector. And that's, challenging.
Yeah, you've touched on something that really kind of always kind of gets me going, because at least within Homeland Security, because we had limited means in which to kind of reward technicians, the only real kind of option to reward that technician over time was to promote them. And of course, being a good technician can be very different from being a good coach, right? The skill sets are not necessarily the same in terms of doing the work yourself versus empowering and developing others to get the work done. And then we pay the price for it when we're not a little more wise and prudent about how we vet and evaluate candidates for promotion into leadership, supervisory ranks, and so on. But you keep talking about the bag of skills that veterans kind of transition into this civilian life with. I wonder if you could help. What do you think is the biggest myth or misunderstanding of veterans by the civilian world for veterans that are transitioning out of the military?
Oh, see, that's a tough one, because I think, it's like Afghanistan in general. Like, all experiences vary. You have the people that work on the base, and you have people that are out patrolling on the battlefield. But, I think when we all come to a point where we decide to leave the service, whether retirement or a majority, I think it's like, 86%, prior to fulfilling their retirement term, separate, I think there's a misconception. I've seen it sitting on the private sector side that, they're a veteran, but they don't have the experience. I wouldn't call it a misconception, but I think the biggest underestimation of the veteran population is our ability to adapt and learn. Because what happens to all of us when we go to basic training, or, whatever you officers went to, you're handed, the infantry manual on the first day, and, you have X amount of days to learn it, and you'll be quizzed on each section each day or whatever it may be. And you better know it word for word. That mentality, that ability that, I've heard it echoed, 10,000 times, the crawl, walk, run, right, approach that the military takes, is something that does not ever leave your mindset. I mean, it's just ingrained in there. And I still do it with, every single new challenge I face as a business owner, and even as a father and husband. How do this is a new task, something I have no idea how to do, but I will be a subject matter expert, and I will be able to teach somebody else this at the end of my time. And so I just think, our adaptability and our ability to just, become SMEs or subject matter experts in a short amount of time. I think that's one of the greatest things, and probably the most undersold characteristic of a veteran, especially when they're sitting on an interview. I think we're all I think we all have a level of humility that's ingrained with us as, we've worn the uniform. It's a sense of, pride, but it's also, you're supposed to be humble. That's how I was raised in the military, and I'm sure you were as well. And so being able to, sell oneself on your ability to just, yeah, I will do this job, or I can, I have the education, I have the experience, and I may not, I have the life experience. I may have the direct experience, but I will be able to learn this job and be proficient at it. And I think that's probably one of the most undersold, underestimated parts of it, for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to get topical here. President Biden announced that we are withdrawing from Afghanistan by September 11th of this year. What's your reaction to that?
So now you have to understand this from the mindset that my time in uniform, I got out as a E5 sergeant. So my high level understanding of strategic plans and things of that nature should not be credited in this response. But for me, I had, I guess, what would be the first impact of what a withdrawal would look like back in 2008. And so all the ground that we had fought for as the 173rd, and so in the Waigaw Valley and the Pesh River valleys and in Kunar Nuristan province, it wasn't probably 8-10 months after we were gone that the Army just pulled everybody back from there, closed the bases down, pretty much handed it back over to the enemy. And so, for me, that was an incredibly hard thing to understand, just like, why after so much time, so much effort and the lives that, were sacrificed in that area, will we just hand it back over? And, I think and again, so I left in 2010 or 2008. There's been a tremendous amount of progress on the ground there as far as, standing up their own security military forces, formation of a, attempt at a stable government. A lot of different factors go into the situation on the ground. But I think at the end of the day, what you're seeing is, the American people that are, tired of a conflict that's gone on for, 20 years at that point in time, should he pull off exactly that day. And so, for me, somebody who served there, I'm proud of the work that we did. I'm proud to have served. And, because at the end of the day, the politics of it, what the president decides, what the commanders in, 1,000 miles away decide, has no effect on your mission at that outpost or on that patrol, because you quickly understand that, all of that goes out the window, A, when the first shot happens, and B, when you realize that the people to the left and right are the only ones that you care about right now. And getting each other back, that's your mission. And so for me, I think those that I served with were proud of our service, were proud of our time on there. I'll never forget it. And I think that the mission that we set out on, day one in May 23rd, 2006 or 2007, and left on, I think, I forget my last day in July of 2007, I left that ground, foot off, understanding that my mission was accomplished. And so, for me, it's those are all big level decisions that are beyond me, but I will always remain proud of my service and my time that I spent in Afghanistan. I really think we made a difference.
And when I shouldn't let you go without asking this question, because you've served in an elite unit, you've served in the Airborne, in the 173rd Airborne in particular, which has a storied history. What would you identify as maybe 2 or 3 of the most important qualities that made it such a high performing unit?
So I think the overall, and you can ask a bunch of people who have served in overseas duty stations, but foreign stationed U.S. Army units that's not the Army. Everyone has a unique feel to it, whether you're in Germany, Italy, if you're any other location in the world, Hawaii even. I think the culture of where we were in Italy, blended with small unit size, just the overall closeness of how we were. I think that really built a cohesive like more of a family before we even deployed.
Mhm.
But by far the most effective, the most effective asset in the shaping of that unit, the shaping of our mission, and how we dressed each and everything was by far the leadership. The leaders there, I can't think of a single one that was not of quality and not somebody that I looked up to. That wasn't just me, Kyle White, private, Kyle White specialist or sergeant, but that was just because they were just solid people that truly, put others before themselves. They understood in order for us all to get back, get safe and accomplish our mission, I have to give far more to these people than I'm going to get in return. But that was just how they put it. They were selfless leaders that, put everyone's needs above their own. And it showed each and every day. That's why we were so close. We would follow these people everywhere, and the lessons and the leadership, the knowledge that was passed down. I know people that are still serving, they were privates with me, and now they're, first sergeants and sergeant majors almost. But, they still talk about that time, in that company, in that platoon, in the leaders that, affected me just the same way as they affected them. It was just a special group of people that came together. But, how we trained and, the investment that the leadership took to us being the best that we can be with the resources we had was definitely a key reason why the unit was the way it was and why we were successful.
All right. What would you say to someone that wants to serve their country, either in the military and law enforcement, Homeland Security, the intelligence community, State Department, whatever it may be? What would you say? What advice would you give them?
Overall, be educated. So, understand what it is that you're going into as best as you can. So, I think, a big thing that I would recommend, especially in today, the age of social media, is to network. Try to find somebody who's, in that job that you were thinking about pursuing, and, reach out and see if you have a conversation and truly understand, what their day-to-day is, how they're supporting their mission, some of the challenges they face, and seeing if that's something that aligns with what you have for your career plans. I would regret not saying that, think about what comes next. So if you're going to, join one of the armed forces, which I encourage everybody to, I think it's great, think about what you want to do after, because I had the intention, I was going to go in and do 20 years and that's going to be my career, retire, and I'll do something else. In all actuality, 9 November 2007 changed my perception of, my time in uniform and what it meant. And so for me, I knew I needed to get out. But then you realize quickly that, as a 11 Bravo infantryman, it doesn't quite translate well into, IT services or even the financial sector. So
that's when the guys in the Corps of Finance
Yeah.
they're looking a lot smarter at that point, or
Exactly.
in comms or something.
Exactly. But that's the point I'm saying. So
Yeah.
think about what that next step might look like should you decide not to serve an entire career in the armed forces. And so, if you just love, cybersecurity or, whatever it may be, think, okay, well, can I do this job inside the military? And does that put me in an advantageous position once I, leave my time in service? And how does that look in the career field that I'm looking to be in? I'd say just be informed, think about what comes next after that, and then, stay hungry and motivated. But I think the biggest part is networking. Even when you're in that job, do the best to be, finding out the broader mission of, what your agency, what your branch supports, and, just have a broader understanding of where your place is and how that affects the broader organization.
It's good advice. It's good advice. Kyle, thank you so much for taking the time to share some lessons learned from your career that continues to unfold in dynamic new areas. And thank you, of course, for your service. If our listeners want to find out more about you or 1109, where can they connect with you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, Kyle White on there. You should be able to find my profile pretty easy, as well as our website, www.11 spelled out -09.com. And that website will go under, a modernization effort here shortly, because our list of offerings is ever expanding. But I'm pretty active on some of the other social. I'm on Facebook and then Instagram as well, official Kyle White. So yeah, it's been a great time being on here, Kumar. I can't, for the life of me, understand why you want to speak to me on this, but and I definitely appreciate it, and hope the listeners enjoyed learning a little bit about me. But again, the U.S. Army's homepage, if you want to learn more about this specific battle, just Medal of Honor, Kyle White, Battlescape, it'll come right up, and it's a pretty incredible experience. So I encourage people to do so.
I remember hearing a story about a White House reception for Medal of Honor recipients, and one of the staffers asked, "What are the blue ribbons around their necks?" And the other person responded, "I don't know, but they must be pretty easy to get. Everyone's got one." Have you ever heard that one?
I haven't heard that one, but I got one little story for you. And so, Lewis, who was going to be on the internet connection, we were at the Bush Presidential Library down in Texas. I think Dallas is where it's at. And, I was there as a recipient. So I was wearing my medal and stuff like that. We were walking around the museum, and there's this display for, all the posthumous Medal of Honors that President Bush awarded while he was in office. And there's a couple in front of us, and they were looking at all the medals, and then they turned around, looked at my medal, and then looked at the display, and they're just like, kind of like, huh, didn't click. It was the same thing. It was just, one of those surreal moments that you're just like, huh, it's pretty interesting. But it's been a crazy ride as a recipient, just in general. I mean, again, with the platform you're given, finding the right purpose for it, and I'm very lucky to have done so. And I just hope to keep, affecting change the population I want to, and moving the bar in the right direction for our nation's veterans.